Yo, what is going on, everyone? I am back with another review video. It is actually going to be on the Aqua Control Zero, something that I was kind of hyped for, but honestly, over the times that I've used it, I have realized that there are just way better control pads out there. However, that does not take away from what the pad excels at. I just feel like overall, there's going to be much better control pads on the market right now. But as per usual, I'm going to just bang out the overall quality of the pad and then talk about the surface and comparisons a bit later. So first off, I want to talk about the stitched edging. Beautiful. Absolutely perfect all around. There is zero fraying, zero warping, and it is like ever so slightly below the surface. It's almost unnoticeable, but it is absolutely amazing, especially for what XrayPad is known for. The other pads that I've owned by XrayPad is going to be their Aqua Control Sakura, which actually is pretty good stitched edging, their AC2, which is pretty mid, and then their Aqua Control Plus, which is the worst stitching out of all of the pads I just listed. So it is absolutely amazing to see that the improvements that they were able to make with these stitched edging, and it is absolutely amazing. I genuinely hope that all of their pads are going to be able to do this kind of stitching. The next thing is the base. Super weird. I do not know what kind of base that could possibly be. I feel like it's pretty much just aesthetic. It doesn't move anywhere. I don't even know like what kind of base they're using. I thought it was Alpha Cell at first, but it isn't. It's just something that's really different, and it just looks kind of funky, but it doesn't really matter since it lays perfectly flat out of the box. And then the other thing too is because it's XrayPad, it is rolled super tight, so it is great to see that this pad was able to lay flat. Next thing that is super important, I am an X-Soft enjoyer, and this pad is definitely not X-Soft. It is more soft. I feel like it's definitely firm. I don't think I could really press into the pad all that much. Especially in game, I don't feel like I could really press into this pad at all. But I do feel like it is slightly soft. It's definitely nice to rest my arm on. I just prefer softer pads because I rest a lot of my form on my pad like this. So it's like close to like my elbow over here. That is all on the pad. So it is just a preference thing. I don't think it really affects the performance of the pad either, whether it was more firm or softer. It's just preference for me that I like X-Soft pads. The next thing I do want to touch base on is the effect of mouse feet. I'm using stock skates on my Death Adder. I have also used BTL, core pads, and Tiger Ice. And in all honesty, they all perform pretty much the same. I don't feel like this pad is feet dependent, which is really good. I hate having to use a specific mouse feet for a certain pad. It is so much better because this pad is just more versatile, so it doesn't really matter what type of feet you are using. It really just depends on the point of the feet. If you're using Tiger Ice, it's going to be fast. If you're using BTL, it's going to be in the middle. If you're using core pads, you hate yourself, and it's going to be super slow. The next thing is the surface feel. Because this is a control pad, I genuinely thought that they were going to be making a cloth pad. Not really. You can see even all over here, you can see that there is tons of texturing, which is not something that I had initially expected. It's definitely their smoothest pad, like to the touch, but it is still a rough pad. Comparing it to things like the GSRC Rouge and even the Saturn Pro, the feel of the pad is so much better on both of those compared to the Zero, just because of all the texturing that I feel like is pretty unnecessary for a control pad. I do feel like the main point of them making it textured is it is going to be slightly faster than something like a Saturn Pro or, like I said earlier, a GSRC Rouge. It is going to be slightly faster just because of the texturing, but I do feel like that takes it away from it being a traditional control pad. I feel like if they had just made it a full smooth cloth surface, I feel like it would have been much better. In terms of overall performance, I feel like the initial friction is very light. The glide is definitely what makes me dislike this pad. In terms of the dynamic friction, little motions like this where you're constantly switching targets, any fast strafing scenarios that you're going to be doing in Kovacs or even playing Overwatch, it just feels like it's constantly tugging during the dynamic friction movement. And the other thing too is it doesn't feel very good. And then the stopping power, I feel like this is definitely where it kind of loses me as a control pad. I don't feel like there's a whole lot of stopping power. So the initial friction is very light, the stopping power is very little, but the dynamic is really what hinders this pad from me wanting to recommend it to people. In all honesty, when there's pads like the Saturn Pro, there is absolutely no reason to recommend other pads. but I usually do tend to think of other options just so that you can get a bigger base or at least have more options to choose from. And this is definitely not something that I would traditionally recommend. While I do feel if you're using a heavier mouse, anything from Zowie really, from their S2 to their EC2, I feel like if you're using those kinds of heavier mice, I feel like this could be really good for Valorant. If you're using lighter mice, I feel like it could be okay for tracking games like Apex and Overwatch. I just feel like if they had made it smoother, then the dynamic friction would feel much more enjoyable. That is really the only downside to this pad. And that is like a huge bummer because I do feel like this pad is really good quality wise. I feel like XrayPad really had something going here, but if they just made it smoother, it would actually be able to compete with other great pads in the market, especially in that similar price range. Even comparing this pad to something like the Aqua Control 2, something that Lethal also sent me in the same shipping, is definitely, it's just better. I don't really see a point to ever using this pad compared to an Aqua Control 2, mainly because the only downside to using the Aqua Control 2 compared to this is it's going to be faster. Other than that, the dynamic friction and initial friction and the stopping power all feel very similar. And I did just want to bring out the Aqua Control 2 just as like a very quick comparison between the two. Both of them come at 500 by 500 and both of them are, in my opinion, pretty good for performance. The Aqua Control 2 has actually been one of my all-time favorite hybrid surfaces. I don't really know why, because I just performed really well on this pad. I think it's just because the initial friction is pretty light, the stopping power is really nice, and the dynamic friction feels consistent all the way around, unlike the Zero. The main difference between the Zero and the Aqua Control 2 is the Zero's dynamic friction just feels very inconsistent. I can't do big swipes like this on the Zero without it feel like it's tugging and feeling a lot of resistance, especially during tracking. So in all honesty, if I was going to recommend either one of these pads, it would definitely be the Aqua Control 2. You can trust it more. It's going to be more consistent. The other thing too is if you're looking to play a precision-based game, I wouldn't recommend either one of these pads. If you were looking for a control pad that is good for that type, then just get the Saturn Pro. It's going to be the same 500 by 500 size if that is what you prefer, and it's going to come in red or black. The quality on the Saturn Pro is also much better than this. Although mine has just a small fray at the top of the stitching is lower on the Saturn Pro, and the base is much more reliable as they're using Poron. But yeah, overall, I definitely would just honestly consider other options out there. While I don't feel like the quality of this pad is bad whatsoever, I feel like XrayPad is doing really well and improving their products. The only thing is it should have been smooth. It just should have been much different, especially for the dynamic friction. It's the only thing that holds this thing back. But yeah, that's pretty much all for my review, and I hope to see you on the next one. Peace.